In 1983, during the Cold War, the world stood on the brink of a nuclear disaster, and in that tense scenario, the figure of Stanislav Petrov stood out, a Soviet officer whose decisions saved millions of lives. That night, at an early warning base, detection systems reported that the United States had launched nuclear missiles. The alarm was triggered within seconds, and everything suggested that it was the beginning of a counterattack that could have destroyed the world in minutes. However, while his colleagues prepared to transmit the alert to their superiors and activate the nuclear response, Petrov decided to question the accuracy of the information. He stopped to think about whether it could be a system error. Was it not strange to receive such a sudden warning without prior signs of a real attack? His intuition and his experience told him that something did not add up, and he chose not to report the supposed threat immediately. Imagine for a moment what would have happened if Petrov had followed protocol without hesitation. In that instant, a chain of orders would have begun that would have led to the launch of nuclear missiles, and the entire world would have fallen into the chaos of a devastating nuclear war. Petrov's decision was an act of courage and critical reflection, demonstrating that in moments of crisis, human judgment can be more reliable than an automated system. He knew that in an environment charged with tension, any technical failure or misinterpretation within the system could have triggered a disproportionate response. Instead of giving in to panic, he analyzed the situation from a broader perspective and considered that it was more likely to be an error than a real attack. This story teaches us that even in the most critical circumstances, stopping to question information and acting with caution can change the course of history. In a world increasingly dominated by technology and automatic protocols, the example of Stanislav Petrov reminds us of the importance of human intervention and healthy skepticism. His decision saved the world from an indescribable disaster and became a powerful reminder that sometimes the ability to doubt and reflect is the best security system we have. Petrov's story is a testament to the value of prudence and to how, in the face of potentially catastrophic errors, critical thinking can mark the difference between peace and destruction. Every time we face important decisions, his example invites us to stop, carefully analyze the situation, and not surrender to the inertia of orders, reminding us that human judgment is essential to avoid mistakes that almost ended the world. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war, and amid the confusion, a single man made a decision that prevented the outbreak of a third world war. In a time of extreme tensions, when every second counted and the fear of an imminent attack could be felt in the air, Vasily Arkhipov, a Soviet officer aboard a submarine, found himself under incredible pressure. The submarine crew had lost communication with the surface, and upon detecting the presence of United States ships and signals they interpreted as a prelude to an attack, they prepared to respond by launching a nuclear torpedo. In that crucial moment, the orders seemed clear to many. If the attack was confirmed, it was imperative to act without delay to protect the homeland. However, Arkhipov refused to follow the wave of panic. Instead of being carried away by fear and by the inertia of military protocol, he made the brave decision to veto the launch of the torpedo. Imagine for a moment being in Arkipov's place, surrounded by crewmates who were convinced that a United States attack was imminent, and feeling how every fiber of your being urged you to respond immediately. But in that tension-filled environment, Arkhipov paused, evaluated the situation, and asked himself whether there was really sufficient evidence to trigger such a catastrophic response. His ability to question the accuracy of the information and his composure in a moment of crisis were decisive. Without his intervention, the submarine could have launched the torpedo, which would have meant an irreversible military escalation that likely would have initiated a devastating nuclear exchange. This story shows us that even under extreme circumstances, human judgment and reflection can make the difference between peace and total chaos. Arkipov's bravery did not lie in blindly following orders, but in his ability to doubt, think, and act responsibly in a situation where every mistake carried unimaginable consequences. It is as if, in a game of chess in which every move can determine the fate of millions, a single player decided to change strategy at the last moment to avoid a devastating checkmate. Arkhipov teaches us that the power of doubt and the importance of making decisions with a cool head are essential in moments of crisis. His example remains a striking reminder that humanity, through reflection and individual courage, can avoid mistakes that might otherwise have ended the world. Every time you think about this episode, it is impossible not to feel deep admiration for that man who, in the midst of the storm of the Cold War, chose prudence over instinct, demonstrating that sometimes true strength lies in knowing how to say no when everything seems to indicate the opposite. The hesitation of Vasily Arkhipov is an enduring lesson on the importance of human judgment in the defense of life and world peace. In 1979, in the midst of the Cold War, the United States came close to initiating a nuclear attack in response to a false alarm caused by a computer failure in the NORAD system. Imagine that suddenly the screens in a control room begin to display alarming signals. Supposedly Soviet missiles were approaching at high speed, and the time to react was reduced to just a few minutes. Confusion and panic took over the room, where every second counted, and the tension was almost palpable. This misunderstanding was due to a computer error, a technical failure that interpreted incorrect data as an imminent threat. Under normal circumstances, automated systems are designed to detect attacks and activate rapid responses without human intervention. But in this case, the distorted information almost led those in charge to make an irreversible decision: to launch missiles in retaliation. Imagine the pressure of being in the control room, watching as every indicator seemed to confirm that an enemy attack was underway, and knowing that any mistake could trigger a global catastrophe. It was as if you suddenly found yourself in a race against time in which the only way out was to rely on instinct and human experience to detect the anomaly. Fortunately, some officers managed to stop and question the accuracy of the signals, remembering that in recent history, there had already been failures in technological systems, and that not everything that glitters is gold. That prudence prevented the tragic decision to initiate a nuclear response, demonstrating that sometimes human intervention is crucial to halt the course of events driven by technical errors. This episode teaches us how dangerous it can be to rely solely on machines and algorithms in critical situations. For example, imagine that at home, your alarm system activates for no reason and alerts you to an imminent break-in. If you were to react immediately without stopping to verify the situation, you could provoke a disproportionate response, such as calling the police and creating unnecessary chaos. Similarly, the failure in the NORAD system was a reminder that technology, although advanced, is not free from errors, and that human judgment is indispensable when it comes to decisions that can change the course of history. The lesson of this incident is clear. In moments of high tension and risk, it is essential to remain calm and analyze information with skepticism before acting. The near tragedy of the NORAD false alarm is a testament to the power of doubt and the value of stopping to think before being carried away by the inertia of automated systems. It is a story that invites us to reflect on the fragility of our technological tools and on the importance that, even in a highly automated world, the human factor continues to be the final guardian of safety and peace. Every time we hear about this incident, we remember how close the world came to catastrophe and the great responsibility that comes with trusting technology without questioning it. In a little-known corner of United States military history, there lies an incident that, if it had been exploited, would have altered the destiny of the world. At Minot Air Force Base, a key installation in nuclear defense, a hatch that was not properly closed allowed a security failure to occur in the nuclear missiles. Imagine for a moment that in a house, a back door is accidentally left open. Although it may seem like a minor oversight, under certain circumstances, it can open the door to unexpected dangers. That is what happened at Minot, where negligence in closing a critical hatch compromised the integrity of a security system designed to keep the worst dangers at bay. At that base, the protocol was clear and strict, since any error could trigger a chain reaction with catastrophic consequences. However, a human oversight, or perhaps a procedural failure, left the hatch in a position that made the nuclear missiles vulnerable to unintended activation. The situation was comparable to having an alarm system in a jewelry store, which, if not properly secured, could activate erroneously and alert security forces, or even, in an extreme scenario, provoke widespread panic. Those responsible at the base realized the error in time, but the possibility that in a moment of confusion or during a crisis, the improperly closed hatch could allow the activation of the missile was serious enough to put global stability at risk. Imagine the chaos if, during a situation of high tension, a single technical failure had led to the activation of a nuclear weapon. The consequences would not simply have been local, but could have escalated into the start of a nuclear war, putting the lives of millions of people in danger. This episode highlights the fragility of systems that manage such destructive technology and the crucial importance of security protocols in military installations. The lesson is clear. Even in highly controlled environments, the human factor and attention to detail can make the difference between peace and disaster. Just as in a high-technology manufacturing plant, every small component must be in perfect condition to avoid failures. In military bases, precision and strict compliance with safety standards are vital to prevent errors that, in the worst case, could have repercussions on a global scale. The story of the open hatch at Minot Air Force Base is a striking reminder that in the handling of nuclear weapons, there can be no margin for error. It is a warning about what happens when routine and negligence combine in contexts where any mistake can mean the difference between global stability and an irreversible catastrophe. It invites us to reflect on the importance of constant vigilance and absolute commitment to security at all levels, from the most advanced technological systems to the daily conduct of those who bear the responsibility of protecting society. This episode, although little known, powerfully illustrates how a small oversight can open the door to unimaginable consequences, underscoring the need to never let our guard down, even in seemingly calm moments. In 1962, during the tense Cuban Missile Crisis, an unusual event occurred that brought the world to the brink of a nuclear catastrophe, all because of a bear in Duluth, a city in the United States. Driven by instinct and the natural curiosity that characterizes these animals, a bear climbed a fence that marked the perimeter of a military installation. No one expected that an animal could disrupt the routine of a system designed to detect enemy intrusions. But what followed was a chain of events filled with tension and confusion. When the bear crossed the fence, the security sensors were activated, interpreting its presence as an imminent threat. Within minutes, an alarm was triggered that put the military on maximum alert. Imagine the chaos in those moments, at the height of a crisis, in which every signal could be interpreted as the prelude to a nuclear attack, as a bear became the involuntary protagonist of a scenario of total panic. Confusion reigned, and officers, unable to distinguish between a system error and a real intrusion, began preparing for the worst. Tension was so high that every second counted, and the possibility of launching a military response, even in the face of the threat posed by an animal, seemed increasingly real. Fortunately, thanks to the calm and rapid analysis of some officers who managed to identify the true cause of the alarm, rash decisions that could have escalated the situation into a nuclear conflict were avoided. This strange episode, known as the Duluth Bear Incident, is a striking reminder of how, in critical situations where technology and protocols are designed to respond to real threats, an error or an unforeseen factor, in this case, the presence of a curious bear, can generate a spiral of uncertainty and panic. It is as if in a high-technology factory, a programming error caused an alarm to sound because of something as simple as a sensor detecting the movement of a shadow. leading people to believe that something terrible is about to happen. In the Duluth incident, the alarm triggered by the bear showed how vulnerable automated systems can be and how indispensable human intervention is to correctly interpret signals in moments of crisis. Even when technology is designed to protect and secure, the ability to question and review what is perceived is fundamental, especially when the risk involves global security. The story of that bear, which unintentionally almost started a nuclear conflict, invites us to reflect on the importance of remaining calm in the midst of chaos, verifying data before acting, and remembering that sometimes what appears to be an imminent threat may simply be the manifestation of an innocent error. This event becomes a lesson in humility and teaches us that in situations of high tension, it is essential to stop and analyze information before making drastic decisions. The Duluth anecdote highlights the fragility of our security systems and the relevance of human judgment, which in this case managed to prevent a disproportionate military response that could have led to unimaginable consequences. Thus, the Duluth Bear incident is remembered not only as a curious episode of the Cold War, but also as a testament to how caution and the ability to discern can save the world from errors that at first glance seem insignificant, but that in the right context have the power to change history. In 1961, at the height of the Cold War, an incident occurred that exposed how dangerous nuclear technology can be and how fragile security systems are. A B-52, one of the strategic aircraft of the United States Air Force, crashed in Goldsboro, North Carolina, carrying 2 high-yield nuclear bombs on board. What seemed like just another accident turned into a chilling episode when it was discovered that one of those bombs was just a single switch away from detonating. Imagine having a security box where with the press of a single button, a mechanism is activated that can change everything in an instant. That was the situation faced by technicians and military personnel on that fateful day. During the accident, emergency systems were activated and the alarm sounded. But amid the chaos, those in charge managed to identify that one of the nuclear devices had a critical failure in its safety mechanism. With an error as simple as a misplaced switch, the bomb could have been triggered. And within minutes, a nuclear explosion would have occurred, with devastating consequences for the entire region. The Goldsboro story is a disturbing example of how a combination of factors, human errors, mechanical failures, and the limitations of the technology of the time, almost pushed the world to the edge of catastrophe. Imagine the panic if instead of controlling the situation, the system had interpreted the circumstances incorrectly and activated the detonation. The entire region, and even the world, could have experienced the aftermath of an accidental nuclear explosion. Subsequent investigations revealed that despite supposedly foolproof safety protocols, small oversights and design flaws could open the door to a disaster of unimaginable scale. To understand the magnitude of the problem, think of a power plant where every component must function perfectly. A minimal error, such as a valve that doesn't close properly, could cause an accident of enormous proportions. That is what happened in Goldsboro, where the vulnerability of the device demonstrated that in the handling of nuclear weapons, there is no margin for error. This incident became a wake-up call for authorities, who were forced to review and strengthen their security systems to prevent another similar situation from occurring. The broken bomb in Goldsboro is remembered not only as a technical failure, but as a lesson in humility in the face of the destructive power of technology and the importance of maintaining constant vigilance in all aspects of security. It is a story that invites us to reflect on how, despite scientific and technological advances, the human factor remains essential in preventing disasters. The near disaster in Goldsboro shows us that in the arms race and in the pursuit of military superiority, there is always the risk that a small error can trigger consequences that go beyond what can be imagined. Every time this incident is recalled, it highlights the need to improve protocols and to not blindly trust automated systems that, although advanced, can fail at critical moments. Thus, the lesson of Goldsboro remains relevant, reminding us that safety and responsibility in the handling of such powerful technologies must be an absolute priority to prevent history from taking a tragic turn in the blink of an eye. In 1958, during some of the most tense moments of the Cold War, the United States Air Force experienced an episode that still generates astonishment and concern today: the loss of the Tybee bomb. That year, an Air Force aircraft facing an in-flight emergency was forced to make a life-or-death decision. In order to save the aircraft and protect its crew, the pilots chose to drop a nuclear bomb near the coast of Georgia, specifically in the waters off the community of Tybee. Imagine being in the air in the middle of a crisis where every second feels endless, and decisions must be made in the blink of an eye. The pressure in the cockpit was immense. The safety of hundreds of lives depended on a moment in which the decision was made to abandon a device of devastating power. Once released, the bomb fell into the Atlantic Ocean, and despite numerous recovery efforts, it was never fully located. Sea conditions, with their unpredictable currents and a complex ocean floor, caused the device to be lost in the depths, leaving behind a mystery that endures to this day. Uncertainty about the location and condition of the bomb has given rise to numerous theories and urban legends. Some people claim that the bomb could, in theory, still be intact somewhere on the ocean floor, raising fears about a possible future accident. Others believe that over time, its components would have deteriorated, eliminating the risk. Although the mere idea that a nuclear bomb is hidden underwater remains unsettling. This incident invites us to reflect on the fragility of security systems and on what it means to make a mistake in the handling of such powerful technology. It is comparable to having a master key at home that, if lost, could allow access to unwanted individuals. In this case, a small error in the midst of a crisis led to the loss of a weapon with the capacity to change the course of history. The story of the Tybee bomb is a striking reminder of how, in the whirlwind of the Cold War, rapid and extreme decisions made under high tension can result in consequences that threaten global stability. Every time this episode is remembered, it underscores the importance of caution, planning, and responsibility in the handling of nuclear weapons. Despite the fact that today we have much more advanced technology and security protocols, the lesson of Tybee remains relevant. Even the smallest mistake or a decision made under pressure can have implications of unimaginable proportions. This account is not only a warning about the destructive power of nuclear weapons, but also a lesson about the need to always maintain constant vigilance and a firm commitment to safety. The loss of the Tybee bomb remains a shadow in military history, a warning that in the world of high technology and international tension, we must never let our guard down, because the slightest oversight can mark the difference between peace and a global disaster. In 1975, amid the space race and in an atmosphere of historic tensions between superpowers, an incident occurred that put at risk not only the safety of the crews, but also cooperation between the United States and the Soviet Union. During the historic Apollo-Soyuz mission, in which two spacecraft of different origins docked in space, a failure occurred in the ventilation system immediately after docking. This failure nearly released lethal toxins inside the shared module, creating a scenario of extreme risk in an already delicate environment. Imagine that after achieving an unprecedented milestone of cooperation between two nations with histories of rivalry, a technical error becomes a threat that could have destroyed not only the mission, but also the trust that had begun to form between both sides. The situation became critical when ventilation system sensors detected unusual levels of dangerous chemical substances. In an environment where every decision and every second counts, controllers and astronauts were forced to act quickly to prevent the toxins from spreading through the shared space of the spacecraft. The tension was palpable. The crews of both spacecraft, who had overcome ideological barriers to work together, suddenly found themselves in the midst of a crisis that threatened their lives. In those moments of uncertainty, the incident could have been the trigger for an escalation that reignited old disputes and revived mistrust between the powers. However, thanks to the rapid intervention of engineers and the astronauts' ability to remain calm under pressure, the system was repaired in time, avoiding what could have been a disaster of unimaginable proportions. This episode not only highlighted the critical importance of having redundant systems and rigorous emergency protocols in space missions, but also underscored how a small technical error can have far-reaching implications in the international arena. It is as if in a high-precision factory, a defective component on the assembly line could trigger a series of failures that compromise the entire final product. In the case of the Apollo-Soyuz incident, the lack of clean air nearly jeopardized the collaboration that represented hope for peace and cooperation in a world divided by the Cold War. The fact that both nations, with histories of mistrust and competition, managed to join forces to resolve the crisis demonstrated that collaboration and communication are fundamental to overcoming both technical and political challenges. The experience lived during that space docking became a valuable lesson for future missions. The importance of preparation, rigorous maintenance, and above all, the need for a coordinated response to any eventuality. Every time this incident is remembered, it highlights the fragility of systems that handle such advanced technologies and the vital importance of human cooperation to ensure safety in the most extreme environments. The Apollo-Soyuz incident remains a testament to how even in space, where technology and engineering are the foundation of exploration, the human factor, with its ability to act quickly and prudently, proves to be the final line of defense against chaos. This episode invites us to reflect on the interconnection between technology and international relations, showing that sometimes a ventilation failure can be the spark that puts at risk not only a mission, but the hope for a world at peace. The Voyager missions of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration have been among the greatest achievements of space exploration, carrying humanity beyond known limits and opening a window into the unknown. However, behind the success of these probes lie engineering details so meticulous that a small error in calculating their trajectory could have had catastrophic consequences. Imagine for a moment that during planning or in the course of flight, a minimal change in the launch angle or in propulsion speed had been miscalculated. That almost imperceptible error would have altered the intended path, causing the probes to follow a different course than planned. In a hypothetical scenario, this deviation would not only have compromised the exploration mission, but could also have destabilized a future planetary defense mission. The idea was that if an asteroid threatened Earth, the Voyagers, with their strategic positioning and the information they could transmit, would serve as sentinels to detect danger and coordinate a timely response. If their trajectories had been altered by a calculation error, vital data needed to activate defense systems could have been lost, leaving the planet vulnerable to an imminent threat. Imagine a mechanical clock in which every gear must function perfectly for the time to be accurate. In the same way, in space missions, every small adjustment and every parameter has a crucial impact on the final outcome. An error as tiny as a fraction of a degree in the probe's orientation, or an imperceptible variation in departure speed, could have caused the trajectory to deviate enough to lose sight of key objectives, or prevent the probe from positioning itself in a strategic area to monitor celestial bodies. This potential failure highlights the importance of absolute precision in space engineering, where every detail is vital and margins of error are extremely small. Scientists and technicians devoted countless hours to calculating, recalculating, and verifying every aspect of the mission, ensuring that every variation was controlled and that the trajectory followed the exact course needed to meet the intended objectives. The risk was comparable to that of a navigator on the open sea, who, if he strays slightly from this course, could become lost in a vast and dangerous ocean, drifting away from land with no chance of return. In the same way, a small error in the trajectory of the Voyager probes could have meant the difference between the success of a mission that contributes to planetary defense and a failure that compromises the safety of our planet. This hypothetical situation is a striking reminder of how in space, where distances are enormous and response times are critical, precision is the decisive factor between success and disaster. Fortunately, thanks to the meticulous work of engineers and scientists, any significant deviation was avoided, allowing the Voyagers to stay on course and continue sending us valuable information from the outer reaches of the solar system. The story of the possible error in the trajectory of the Voyager probes teaches us that in space exploration, every small detail matters, and that even the slightest slip can have large-scale repercussions. It is a lesson about the importance of accuracy, constant vigilance, and meticulous planning in space missions, reminding us that the success of such an ambitious endeavor depends on the perfect synchronization of countless variables. Every time we hear about the incredible journey of the Voyagers, we can feel deep admiration for the hard work and precision that made it possible for humanity to venture into the mystery of the universe, while also showing us how delicate and crucial the balance between technology and planetary safety truly is. In 1986, in the remote southwest of Cameroon, a natural event occurred that demonstrated the fragility of our environment and the importance of understanding and controlling phenomena that can seem to escape human comprehension. At Lake Nyos, a volcanic lake of natural origin, a silent accumulation of carbon dioxide built up in its depths. This invisible and odorless gas accumulated slowly due to underground geological processes. However, in one fateful instant, a sudden release of carbon dioxide caused a gaseous avalanche that descended as a dense and lethal cloud down the slopes of the lake, sweeping away everything in its path. Imagine being in a peaceful area surrounded by nature, and suddenly, without warning, an invisible but deadly cloud moves at great speed. That was the experience suffered by thousands of people and animals in the villages near the lake. The mass of carbon dioxide, being denser than air, flowed along the ground, displacing oxygen and causing mass suffocation within minutes. Victims who were sleeping or going about their daily activities had no opportunity to react to this unforeseen natural phenomenon. This tragic event, known as the Lake Nyos disaster, not only revealed the immense power of nature, but also a failure of human foresight. Despite the fact that scientists had warned about the possibility that certain volcanic lakes could store dangerous gases, at Nyos, the necessary monitoring measures and control systems were not implemented to detect and mitigate a release of this magnitude. It is as if, in a factory, the existence of a safety system on a machine were ignored, one that, although it rarely fails, could cause a disaster if not properly maintained and constantly supervised. The Lake Nyos tragedy alerted the international community, showing that the interaction between geological processes and human activity can have devastating consequences if adequate precautions are not taken. In addition, this incident became a case study on the importance of continuous monitoring in areas of natural risk, especially those where volcanic activity can generate accumulations of toxic gases. The lesson is clear. Nature can surprise us at any moment, and preparation, technology, and cooperation among experts from different disciplines are essential to prevent a natural phenomenon from turning into a catastrophe. The story of Nyos invites us to reflect on global vulnerability and to understand that in a world where environmental and geological changes are inevitable, it is vital to invest in research and early warning systems. Thus, what initially seemed like an isolated event became a global wake-up call, reminding us that even as technology and science advance rapidly, we must still be prepared to face and mitigate the unforeseen events that nature may bring. The Lake Nyos disaster remains a somber warning of what can happen when lack of control and foresight combine with the uncontrollable power of the Earth, underscoring the need to act with responsibility and anticipation to protect life and the stability of our planet. In 1984, the city of Bhopal in India witnessed one of the worst industrial disasters in history, an event that left an indelible mark on collective memory and powerfully showed how devastating human error, combined with negligence and safety, can be. Imagine living in a place where, in an instant, everything you know can change radically. At a pesticide factory, an error in the handling and maintenance of chemical storage tanks caused a large amount of toxic gas to escape uncontrollably, flooding the streets and homes of the city. This lethal and invisible gas spread rapidly, affecting tens of thousands of people. The scale of the disaster was such that it is estimated that thousands died in the first hours, and many more suffered long-term consequences to both health and the environment. To understand the gravity of the situation, think of the following example. It is as if an entire city were subjected to an alarm that no one can hear, but that at the same time releases a dangerous substance that silently attacks everything it touches. Confusion and panic took over Bhopal, the streets filled with people desperately trying to escape the affected area, unaware that the danger was invisible and spreading quickly. Authorities, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the disaster, were slow to understand what was happening, and emergency measures were compromised by a lack of preparation and communication failures. Chemical negligence manifested not only in the failure of the safety system, but also in the absence of adequate protocols to prevent or mitigate a leak of such magnitude. It is as if, in a house with faulty alarm systems, a small lapse in maintenance allowed a gas leak to turn into a tragedy, putting the lives of all residents at risk. The Bhopal catastrophe left painful lessons about the importance of prevention, rigorous maintenance, and responsibility in handling hazardous substances. Although this incident did not end the world, it clearly demonstrated how destructive human error can be when combined with a lack of control and oversight in high-risk industries. The experience in Bhopal underscores that safety and chemical handling is not only a technical issue, but a moral responsibility that affects entire communities. Every time these events are remembered, we are invited to reflect on the need to learn from past mistakes to prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future. This event, although tragic, has become a powerful reminder of the importance of acting with caution and not underestimating the destructive potential of failures in complex systems. The story of Bhopal is, ultimately, a call to action to improve safety protocols, invest in preventive technology, and above all, to recognize that in the handling of hazardous substances, every detail matters and every minute of inaction can have irreversible consequences. In 1979, amid the tension of the Cold War, and at a time when space exploration was beginning to open unimaginable horizons, an incident occurred that brought the world to the brink of an unexpected conflict. A false alarm detected weapons orbiting around Earth. At that time, an error in the radar system of the United States interpreted unusual signals as if potentially hostile objects were circulating in space, generating an unprecedented alarm at military headquarters. Imagine suddenly looking at the sky and discovering that armed satellites are ready to attack at any moment, and immediately feeling the pressure to respond to that threat. That was the sensation experienced during those critical moments. Authorities, immersed in uncertainty and fear of an imminent attack, faced a decision with enormous implications: to respond militarily and attack in orbit, or to wait until the facts were clarified. A hasty response could have meant the start of a space war, a conflict that would have transformed the arms race into a real threat in space, carrying rivalry from Earth to unimaginable levels. Fortunately, after careful analysis, it was determined that this was a false alarm. Experts found that the anomaly was the result of a technical error in the radar, a failure that, instead of detecting harmless satellites or space debris, mistakenly interpreted certain light reflections and movements as signs of an attack. The decision to rule out an orbital attack at that precise moment prevented what could have been an uncontrolled escalation, marking the boundary between science fiction and reality. Think of a situation similar to a fire alarm that goes off by mistake in a building. Although panic may take hold at that instant, calm returns when it is verified that everything is in order. In the same way, the 1979 incident showed that although space technology was advancing rapidly, detection systems could fail, and that a small error could have triggered high-risk military decisions. The experience of that day became a crucial lesson for both military personnel and scientists, highlighting the importance of maintaining rigorous verification procedures and relying on human judgment as a last resort in emergency situations. The fact that a space war was nearly initiated underscored how delicate security is in a domain where technology and politics are so intricately intertwined. At that time, the idea of militarizing space seemed like something out of a science fiction novel, but this incident showed that reality could approach those limits at any moment. In addition, the situation opened a debate about the need to internationalize safety standards in space and to prevent the arms race from extending beyond Earth's atmosphere, reminding us that space, with all its vastness, should be a realm of peaceful exploration and global cooperation. Every time the 1979 near miss of a space war is recalled, it highlights the fragility of warning systems and the importance of careful verification in moments of crisis. It is a tangible example of how a technical error, combined with the inherent tension of the Cold War, could have led to a devastating escalation. Fortunately, the prudent decision to wait and confirm the information avoided a catastrophic outcome, leaving as a legacy the need to continually review and improve security systems in space. This episode remains a powerful reminder that in the delicate balance between technology and humanity, calm, careful analysis and human judgment are essential to preserve peace and prevent errors from becoming real threats. In 1971, the Soyuz 11 mission became one of the most shocking tragedies in space exploration, leaving an indelible mark on the history of humanity's quest to reach space. The crew, made up of 3 cosmonauts, had successfully completed docking operations and their work aboard the Salyut 1 space station. But at the moment of their return to Earth, a malfunction of critical valves caused a lethal depressurization. Imagine traveling on an airplane in mid-flight, and suddenly, a door opens without warning, creating a deadly loss of pressure that puts your life at risk. In space, where every detail matters, the failure of a component as small as a valve was enough to produce devastating consequences. Negligence in the system, combined with a protocol that did not adequately account for this type of failure, resulted in the irreversible loss of the crew, leaving the world in shock and the international community immersed in grief and disbelief. The incident not only marked the tragic end of a mission, but also opened a debate about safety and responsibility in the space race. Some experts argue that if a different step had been adopted in the return protocol, it might have been possible to avoid the deaths of the cosmonauts. However, that same alternative could have ignited diplomatic tensions and conflicts in space. Imagine that in a moment of crisis, a country decides to act unilaterally without consulting its allies or adversaries, generating distrust and an escalation of rivalries in an environment where cooperation is vital. In the context of the Cold War, where every action was watched and evaluated with suspicion, a different response could have reignited tensions between the superpowers, pushing space competition to a dangerous and risky level. The events of Soyuz 11 teach us that in space exploration, margins of error are as narrow as the vacuum that separates the stars, and that every procedure, no matter how small it may seem, can determine the fate of those who dare to fly beyond Earth's atmosphere. It is comparable to the work of a tightrope walker, where a single slip can be fatal. Precision and constant review of every system are therefore essential to ensure mission safety. On that fateful day, the combination of a technical failure and the pressure inherent in decision-making under extreme conditions resulted in a tragedy that forever changed the way crewed space returns are managed. The loss of Soyuz 11 also became a worldwide wake-up call about the importance of learning from mistakes, innovating safety measures, and strengthening international cooperation in space exploration. Protocols were revised, and new monitoring and redundancy systems were implemented to ensure that a similar failure would never happen again. Thus, the lesson of that tragic incident was twofold. On one hand, it revealed the fragility of systems in an environment as hostile and demanding as space. And on the other, it underscored the urgent need to act with caution and responsibility, since every decision, every adjustment, and every review can mark the difference between success and a disaster of unimaginable proportions. The memory of the Soyuz 11 cosmonauts remains a lasting reminder that in the delicate balance between technological progress and human life, safety and cooperation must always be the highest priorities. In 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, in what was then the Soviet Union, became the scene of a disaster that marked a turning point in the history of nuclear energy worldwide. During a safety test, multiple human errors and design flaws combined in a catastrophic way, causing an explosion that released enormous amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Imagine carrying out a routine task in which every step, no matter how small, must be executed perfectly to avoid an accident. At Chernobyl, a series of poor decisions and technical negligence resulted in an error that no one could have imagined. The test was intended to simulate a power failure to determine whether, in the event of an outage, the cooling system could function without external assistance. However, due to a series of mistakes, critical safety mechanisms were disabled and essential protocols were ignored. The result was a devastating explosion that not only destroyed a significant portion of the plant, but also released radioactive clouds that spread across much of Europe. Imagine a factory where failing to inspect a critical component could cause the entire system to collapse and lead to irreparable damage. That was the scale of the error at Chernobyl. A lapse in procedure and the lack of an appropriate response triggered a chain of events with global consequences. The radiation released affected the health of thousands of people, causing severe illnesses and increasing cancer risk for future generations. In addition, the environment suffered irreparable damage. Vast areas of land were contaminated, and the region's flora and fauna were seriously affected for decades. The Chernobyl disaster also had a profound impact on global politics, as it exposed weaknesses in the Soviet nuclear safety system and sparked an international debate about the management and regulation of nuclear energy. This tragic event became a bitter lesson about what can happen when technology and human responsibility are combined irresponsibly. It is like a massive city fire spreading due to the lack of maintenance in a faulty alarm system, causing incalculable damage and forcing a reassessment of how property and human lives are protected. The Chernobyl catastrophe changed the way the world views nuclear energy, prompting reforms in the industry and in international legislation to prevent something so devastating from happening again. Although the Chernobyl error did not end the world, it left a deep scar in history and a warning about the dangers of negligence and lack of rigor in the handling of potentially dangerous technologies. Every time this disaster is remembered, it reinforces the need to act with caution, responsibility, and constant vigilance, because in the delicate balance between innovation and safety, a single mistake can have consequences that span generations. The lesson of Chernobyl is clear. Precision, commitment to safety protocols, and honesty in risk assessment are indispensable to protect not only people, but also the environment and global peace. In 1987, the world was stunned to learn of the feat, or the recklessness, of Matthias Rust, a young German pilot who, defying all rules and protocols, managed to land his small aircraft in the iconic Red Square in Moscow. Imagine the scene. In the midst of the Cold War, when distrust and tension dominated relations between East and West, a determined and audacious young man flew into the heart of the Soviet capital, violating a security barrier that had been considered impenetrable. While many were preparing for the possibility of a military attack, Rust's unexpected flight was initially interpreted as an intrusion that could have triggered a hostile response. In an environment where every movement was closely monitored and any error could signal the start of a major conflict, the approach of an unauthorized aircraft to Soviet defenses represented an incalculable risk. To put it in perspective, It is as if someone slipped into a heavily protected, restricted zone in a major city without warning and revealed their presence to authorities, creating confusion and panic about their true intentions. Rust's audacity highlighted not only the fragility of defense systems, but also the importance of having communication and control mechanisms capable of distinguishing between a real threat and an act driven by rebellion or curiosity. His actions, which many viewed as an act of courage or peaceful protest against oppression, also demonstrated how dangerous human error can be in moments of intense international tension. If Soviet authorities had misinterpreted Rust's incursion as the prelude to an attack, a chain of military reactions could have been unleashed, potentially escalating into a nuclear conflict with unimaginable consequences. At that time, the threat of war was always present, and any anomaly on radar could become the trigger for a disproportionate response. The situation is similar to a scenario in which, during a fire alarm in a building, confusion and panic force a full evacuation, when in reality, it may simply be a system malfunction. The impact of Matthias Rust's flight went beyond symbolism. It was a wake-up call that exposed vulnerabilities in military security and questioned the effectiveness of protocols in a context of extreme geopolitical tension. In addition, his act prompted a strong reaction within the Soviet Union, leading to reforms in the defense system and changes in how critical information was handled. Rust's story invites us to reflect on how a single error, or in this case an apparently absurd action, can alter the course of history. It is a reminder that in situations of extreme pressure, the interpretation of events depends largely on human judgment and the ability to distinguish between a genuine threat and an act driven by personal or ideological motives. Every time the incident of the pilot who landed in Red Square is recalled, it highlights the importance of communication, careful evaluation of information, and above all, the need to remain calm in critical moments where every second counts and a miscalculation could change the fate of millions. In 1979, in the city of Sverdlovsk, an incident occurred that revealed the dark side of biological weapons research. That year, an accidental anthrax release caused by a simple maintenance error, a misplaced filter in a highly confidential laboratory, unleashed a devastating chain of events. Imagine that in your home, a small oversight in the installation of a ventilation system allowed contaminants to enter the environment, affecting everyone's health. That is what happened in Sverdlovsk. A tiny failure in the safety infrastructure allowed anthrax spores to escape and disperse through the air, affecting dozens of people in an already sensitive area during a time of intense global tension. The tragedy spread rapidly, and within days the disease quietly propagated, wreaking havoc on the local population. The seriousness of the incident lies in the fact that despite being caused by an apparently insignificant error, a poorly positioned filter, the consequences were lethal. This accidental release not only caused the deaths of dozens of people, but also exposed the hidden dangers of laboratories that, in their pursuit of developing and storing biological weapons, often neglect critical safety protocols. Imagine the impact on an entire community if instead of an isolated error, a systemic failure occurred at a chemical or pharmaceutical plant. The damage would multiply, affecting thousands or even millions of people. What is most disturbing about this incident is that it revealed the existence of secret programs and poorly managed laboratories whose goal was the development of weapons of mass destruction under a veil of secrecy. For years, authorities denied any involvement in the handling of biological agents, and the Sverdlovsk incident became one of the darkest examples of how negligence and excessive secrecy can have catastrophic consequences. In simple terms, it was like discovering that in a food processing plant, an error in the production chain allowed a dangerous contaminant to infiltrate products, causing a public health crisis. The response to the emergency was slow and filled with uncertainty. Those affected, mostly unaware of the source of the threat, began to fall ill in ways that doctors could not immediately explain. Later investigations confirmed that it was an anthrax outbreak, and the international community was forced to confront the reality that biological weapons, although invisible, represent a real and constant danger. This incident left a deep scar on global awareness, reminding us that safety in the handling of hazardous substances must be uncompromising, and that a single mistake can unleash unimaginable consequences. The Sverdlovsk incident is ultimately a wake-up call about the urgent need for transparency, rigorous oversight, and meticulous maintenance in laboratories that handle biological agents. It is a lesson in how, in the world of high technology and military research, negligence, no matter how small it may seem, can have deadly repercussions for society as a whole. Every time this tragic episode is remembered, it reinforces the importance of learning from past mistakes to ensure that science and technology always serve to protect life rather than put it at risk. In 1999, an apparently insignificant error demonstrated how a lack of precise coordination can put multi-million-dollar space missions at risk. The story of the Mars Climate Orbiter is a clear example of this. This satellite, designed to study the Martian climate, was lost entirely due to a confusion between the metric system and the imperial system. Imagine that you work at a large company and two teams collaborate on a crucial project. One calculates distances, speeds, and forces in meters and kilometers, while the other uses feet and miles. Although both systems are valid, if the proper conversion is not made, the final result can be completely wrong. That is exactly what happened at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. One team delivered data in imperial units, while the software and navigation calculations were based on the metric system. This discrepancy caused the spacecraft to perform incorrect maneuvers and deviate from its intended trajectory. The impact was devastating. The Mars Climate Orbiter came too close to the atmosphere of Mars. Instead of orbiting the planet, it disintegrated or burned up during entry, losing the opportunity to collect valuable information about the climate of the Martian surface. This failure, despite being only a problem of unit conversion, had enormous consequences, not only in economic terms, but also for the reputation and morale of the teams involved. To put it in perspective, think of a cooking recipe in which the amount of flour is indicated in cups, but the cook interprets it in grams. The resulting cake could be a complete disaster, affecting not only the flavor, but also the texture and presentation. In the same way, what seemed like a minor detail turned into a catastrophic error that put at risk missions that had required years of planning and millions of dollars in investment. The lesson of this incident is clear. In space exploration, where every detail matters and margins of error are extremely small, it is vital that all teams work with the same precision and technical language. Coordination and communication are essential so that every part of a project, no matter how complex it may be, functions in perfect harmony. The story of the Mars Climate Orbiter became a permanent reminder that in the fields of engineering and science, no detail is too small to be overlooked. As a result of this fiasco, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration implemented stricter reviews in its communication and data verification protocols. Control systems were strengthened, and procedures were established to ensure that all calculations are performed using the same units. The experience served to remind everyone that in an environment as complex as space missions, even the error of misinterpreting a measurement can have disastrous consequences. This incident, which at first might have seemed like a simple misunderstanding between units of measurement, showed the world the importance of precision and uniformity in large-scale technological projects. Every time the failure of the Mars Climate Orbiter is mentioned, it stands out as an example of how a small error can put at risk not only a mission, but the safety and future of space exploration. The story teaches us that in the age of advanced technology, attention to detail and clear communication between teams are just as crucial as innovation itself, reminding us that technical excellence is the foundation upon which great human achievements are built.